Wow, thank you very much, big guy. Sure appreciate that. This time I'd like to ask Rob Anderson to come up. I think many people know Rob Anderson, but I'll give you a slight introduction. He's a partner in the law firm of WKA in Airdrie, Alberta. He was admitted to the Law Society of Alberta in 2007. He received his BA in Communications in 2003 and obtained his Juris Doctorate from the University of Alberta in 2006. Rob has been extensively involved in public service. He was the Alberta Public Accounts Committee Chair, an Alberta Treasury Board member, Assistant Solicitor General of Alberta, the Alberta Official Opposition House Leader, the Airdrie Member of Legislative Assembly of Alberta, Airdrie Health Foundation Vice Chair, a Rocky Mountain Community Links Board member, and a Highline Primary Care Network Board member. He's a full-time dad, an avid hiker, and enjoys traveling the world. Highest item on his bucket list is to visit every country and try their signature dish and signature drink. His favorite quote is by Wayne Gretzky: "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." I'd like to invite Rob Anderson to this.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
How you doing?
Whoa, good.
Welcome to one of the last great bastions of freedom and free speech and liberty. That's rural Alberta. Welcome. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for being here today, for showing your courage against just constant barrage of attacks and shaming that goes on in our social media and in our big tech and our politicians, the mainstream media. It's unbelievable, isn't it? The pressure that's mounted against people who want to stand up for what's right, for what's good in this world. And one of those great things, of course, is fighting for liberty. And that's what you're doing here today, so thank you very much. The reason they don't like you, or they don't like these types of gatherings, is because it shows they can't control you, because you won't be controlled. They hate that. They love to have control. They love to be able to tell people what to do and how to do it and what they can and can't say. They like that, and you won't do that. You'll have none of it. And that's why it's so important that you continue this on, so that you don't give them that control. So for those who don't know me, yes, I am Rob Anderson, the former MLA for Airdrie. I'm now a litigator, business owner, and a political commentator on my webcast, Unfiltered. Hopefully you'll sign up and see it. Facebook hasn't taken me down yet. YouTube has censored me on a couple of these speeches so far, giving me a warning that they're just not going to tolerate all this anti-science from me. But really, I don't really give a flying flip what YouTube thinks of this.
Amen.
Today I want to talk to you about the hysteria, obviously, around COVID, and how leftists and globalists around the world are hoping to use this so-called pandemic to fundamentally alter our way of life long term, and what we can do here in Alberta to stop this movement from succeeding. Now, I want to preface this to say that I don't believe that COVID itself, the virus itself, is made up or a hoax. I don't think most of us do. It's a very serious strain. It's a very serious virus that is more contagious and more deadly than the regular flu is. However, it is equally clear from every data point that has been gathered that COVID-19 is not even close to as serious or as deadly as is being claimed by the media or by your politicians. And you're being lied to about the seriousness of this virus, period. Then the Western world's response to the virus has caused significantly more harm and death than the virus itself. And there are so many examples of this in our province. Suicides and opioid deaths at record levels. We have a mental health epidemic in our communities, especially among our young people. And a rising generation that we have taught to fear and judge rather than to live and to love.
Yes, yes.
That's not acceptable.
Yes.
I want to pause there because I want to talk about what's happening to our children. There are many examples of what's happening. I've talked about a couple of them, but I just was contacted by a teacher who saw one of her students take his own life recently. And talking to the parents cited the social isolation of the lockdowns, not being able to get out and see his friends, and he just lost hope. And all he had was social media, and we all know how terrible that can be. And there was an article on the CBC, yes, the CBC, if you can believe it, a couple days ago, and it said that over the last 4 months, the amount of teenagers, so those under the age of 18 who have been admitted to hospital because of suicide attempts, has quadrupled from the previous year. 4 times as many young people have tried to take their lives over these lockdowns. Now you tell me, when you hear people say that you're out here being selfish because you want to end the lockdown, you just say that what you're trying to do is stop the child abuse that is being perpetrated on our children by the government. And make sure you reach out to young people. They're confused right now. This doesn't make sense. They haven't known anything else other than this for the most part. This is completely new. They don't have that historical perspective that many of you have. So it's very important that you reach out to them, that you help them understand, that you give them perspective, that you just love them. Because they're under a lot of pressure right now. They don't quite know how to deal with it. So please reach out to those in your associations, circles, families. Don't forget them right now. They need your help and support. There are other examples of what these lockdowns have done. At a recent UN conference, the director of the World Food Program confirmed that due to the lockdowns, the number of people at risk from death due to starvation has increased from 135 million in the previous year to 270 million this year. And as a result, the world is facing its worst humanitarian disaster over these next couple of years that it's had in decades and decades. Think about that, 135 million more people than the normal are literally facing starvation due to these lockdowns and the economic devastation and the devastation on the food supply and everything else that these lockdowns have caused those, especially those who can least afford it in third world and struggling economies. It's simple, folks. When governments step in and they destroy and they damage economies and they interfere in economies in the way that they have here these past 12 months and counting, people lose their hope, they lose their businesses, they lose their means of support, and even their families. People die.
Yeah.
There are consequences. Yeah. They're not saving lives. Yeah. They're not.
No. Absolutely.
And these lockdowns are killing people around the world at a rate, as you know, faster than COVID is killing people at. And of course, COVID is, of course, focusing its wrath primarily on our dear senior citizens, which is, of course, terrible, and we want to do everything that we can to protect the vulnerable in this crisis. But these lockdowns are killing those in the prime of their life. They're killing young people. They're killing young moms, young fathers. These are the people that the lockdowns are killing. So if you compare, if we added up the years lost to lockdowns as opposed to lost to COVID, the difference would be even more stark than it is. But the news and our politicians, well, they don't want to dwell or report on stuff like that. And the reason for that is this: they've made their choice. They've made their virtue signaling claim,
Yes.
and they have to manipulate the news in any way they can to look like they got it right,
Yes.
when so obviously they got it so horribly wrong.
Yes.
So that's what they do. They manipulate. They repeat it over and over and over again. And a lot of your friends and family and people that otherwise very intelligent people are amazingly swayed by the lies.
Yes.
Over and over and over again.
Yes.
The provincial and federal governments completely disregarded their emergency pandemic response plans that were prepared for an event just like this by actual emergency response experts. Instead, we've crowned as our leaders glorified medically trained bureaucrats and imbeciles
Yes.
with clearly no ability to perform a proper risk assessment or to understand the value of our civil liberties and freedoms. So people ask, well, Rob, what should we do about this? Get that question quite a bit. Well, the emergency plan was to, like, what would you have done? What could have we have done differently? Well, the emergency plan was to focus our resources on protecting seniors living facilities, in senior living facilities and in hospitals. It was to have teams of care workers tested and quarantined with the seniors in those facilities for a couple of weeks at a time. So they would quarantine, make sure that they were COVID-free, go in, work for a couple of weeks, get double, triple hazard pay for doing so, come out, another team moves in, and you rotate through instead of spreading it all over the place like they did. It was a surgical approach that needed to happen here, a smart, thoughtful, surgical approach. Instead, what did government do? They took out their sledgehammer and beat the hell out of all the economy and everybody. They treated everybody as if they were a vulnerable person.
Unbelievable.
Insane.
Insane.
Absolute stupidity. I guess I would say, so the question is why? Instead of the surgical approach, you had a bunch of I would say, trust fund baby politicians like Justin Trudeau, and career politicians like Jason Kenney, who have no idea what it's like to start a business. They have no idea what it's like not to have a guaranteed paycheck from Daddy's trust fund or from the government coffers, from the taxpayers. And you have these guys implementing these draconian shutdowns of entire sectors of the economy, populated primarily by those with little to no risk of a serious reaction to the virus. This was alluded to earlier, but think about this. How many people under 20 in the entire country, 35 million or whatever it is in this country, under the age of 20, how many have died from COVID?
Zero.
Zero. Not one person. So what do these idiots do?
Yeah.
They shut down all of the schools.
Yeah.
They shut down all of the children's sporting activities.
Teachers believe it.
Why wouldn't they let these children go to school, tell the teachers, any teacher that had a pre-existing condition or was at risk, go home, we'll take care of you, and let these children be educated and live their lives?
Yes.
Why didn't they do that?
Yes.
Pure stupidity. Alberta's own government's tracing statistics makes it abundantly clear there was almost no transmission in restaurants and gyms and salons and small businesses. So what do these guys do? They shut them down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they let the big box stores stay open.
Yeah. It's crazy.
People running around, getting, as if nothing's going on at Walmart and Target and all that. But you own a small business like Mr. Manti over there, they'll shut you down.
Yeah.
Incredible. So it's a tough time, it's a scary time. Our very liberties are being trampled. Unaccountable officials whisking people away from the airport to hotel detention centers.
Yeah.
Pastors thrown in jail for preaching to those in spiritual need, like Pastor Coates. Let's give a hand to Pastor Coates. And I have to say, he is. Where's our guy with the sign? There it is. Come on, there you go. He was an Olds, last time. Give him a hand. And what did we say? We said, Premier Kenny, get your butt in gear and get Pastor Coates out of jail last time. That's what we said, right? Well, guess what? Pastor Coates is out of jail. Now they got to drop the charges, right?
Yeah.
Drop those charges. So we have these situations, and we have a so-called conservative premier in Alberta telling us how many people we can and can't have in our own homes. Can you imagine that?
No.
Quite a conservative premier.
Yeah.
Quite a liberty-loving premier we have.
Yeah.
Millions died for the right to assemble freely, and now we have the government telling us who we can and can't have in our homes, with our families. That has got to stop. Just love Premier Kenny on the tube telling us about how this isn't really a lockdown. This isn't really a lockdown. You can still go out for food and all that. Premier, you can't even have mom and dad over for supper. Give your head a shake. That's a lockdown. He needs to do a lot of things, frankly. We need to never forget this moment. We need to never forget what your leaders were willing to do when the going got tough. At worst, they used it for political advantage. At best, as was the case in this province, they folded like a cheap tent after hearing the tantrums of those on the left. who would be paid, frankly, to stay at home the whole time, while their neighbors lost their livelihoods, in some cases their lives.
Yeah.
But is there something more going on here? Is there another agenda?
Yeah.
Now, of course, governments do it, these lockdowns, they say, to keep us all safe from the virus. Depending on the politician, this is either a statement stemming from ignorance and fear, or in the case of others, it is a flat-out lie in furtherance of their agenda. And it is one such agenda I wish to touch on today, as well as what we need to do about it. You've probably heard of the Great Reset? Yeah. The Great Reset is one of Justin Trudeau's projects. He's advocating, you know, this crowd doesn't like Justin Trudeau. Well, I thought, oh man, that's a surprise. You've probably heard Justin Trudeau advocating for this thing on multiple occasions. So what is this Great Reset? Well, for that we need to go to the UN's World Economic Forum. And this is the forum that globalist world political economic leaders like Justin Trudeau attend to coordinate with others how to tackle primarily climate change and their little leftist social justice issues and so forth. It's like a socialist boot camp for billionaires, politicians, and trust fund babies, kind of. Their website explains, they don't hide anything, by the way. Their website's very clear what they're looking for. What they're looking for in this is they want to transition the world from a shareholder ownership of companies to stakeholder ownership of companies, meaning you won't really own for-profit companies anymore. Businesses will be told by government what they can and cannot sell. Just like we see a lot today during this COVID pandemic, if you'll notice, so-called pandemic. Some businesses will be illegal or taxed and regulated for the purpose of being phased out of existence entirely, and that includes specifically the abolition of all fossil fuels. Businesses and individuals will also be told by the government what their CO2 footprint can and can't look like. For agriculture, specifically for ranchers and farmers, they'll be told what they can and can't produce, or they will be taxed in a manner that will make them obey or go bankrupt regardless. The Great Reset also calls for a massive, unprecedented redistribution of wealth. And I'm not just talking about higher taxes for the wealthy. I'm talking about world equalization payments. Much like Alberta sent tens of billions to Quebec and the Maritimes to support their poorly run social programs and economies, countries and businesses with more wealth will be compelled to share that wealth with poorer countries in profitable and corrupt industries. And further, the UN and other globalist organizations will be given the power over the world's economies and governance. Effectively, you will no longer really vote for a local representative in a government body that has a real, meaningful power over the most important aspects of your lives: communications, media, economic policy, trade policy, health and education. All of it will be primarily governed largely by centralized, primarily unelected bureaucrats and large tech companies. The United Nations, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, and the World Economic Forum will essentially be setting the laws for the world to follow. This is not a conspiracy, it's happening. There are dozens of examples of it happening right in front of our eyes. It's the plan of the leftist globalists. They're not hiding it at all. The Great Reset is designed to usher in an era of global quasi-democratic socialism for the purpose, they will tell you, of saving the world from the climate crisis and the evil imbalances and injustices of capitalism. Evil capitalism. It's done nothing for the world, has it? I'm being facetious. You couldn't tell. And Justin Trudeau is a key member of this movement. He is one of its most public champions and advocates. Let's be perfectly clear here. The stated objective of Justin Trudeau's Liberals, from his own mouth during the last campaign, is to accelerate the phase-out of the West's energy industry. And Jason Kenney, though he says, in fairness, that he will not support the Great Reset, he has done absolutely nothing to stop its agenda from entering within our borders. So everyone listening to this whose family or business relies wholly or partially on a healthy energy industry, does anybody have a job here in the energy industry? Put your hands up. Anybody have a job that relies on a healthy energy industry? Yeah, just a few of you. So if you have that, how about ranching, agriculture? Yeah? I love that cowbell. Gotta have more of that. If you have your job, or if your job is related or needs these agriculture and energy industry to be healthy here in Alberta, your family and your businesses are in the crosshairs of Canada's current federal government, and the current provincial government, under its current leadership, is doing nothing to stop it. People can stick their heads in the sand on this, and they often do. But if they do, they will wake up one day to find out the liberties and freedoms that we had all once cherished and enjoyed are gone, as well as our savings, our wealth, our businesses, our way of life, and a whole lot more. So what do we do about it here in Western Canada? How, in Alberta in particular, how do we fight against a movement so vast and so coordinated and powerful? It seems like a bit of an uphill climb, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. We've never been afraid of a little uphill battle, have we, here in Alberta? No. First off, do not be silent any longer.
Yeah.
Don't be silent. Don't be shouted down by the left-wing media, because they'll do it,
Yeah.
guaranteed. Doesn't matter what the facts are.
Yeah.
They will make you out to be demons and everything else under the sun. Don't be shouted down by billionaire-backed organizations or big tech, Facebook, YouTube, any of these, Twitter. Good grief, Twitter. And don't be cowed by our left-wing or our weak-kneed politicians in this province or in this country. You must speak up to your elected officials. There are good ones out there. So you got to find them, and you got to speak to them and keep them strong and on the path. You must speak to your family and friends, of course. Get groups of like-minded individuals together and join, this is key, join your local, federal, and provincial constituency associations for your MLA and your MP. Make sure that your mayors, your MLAs, your MPs are not part of this movement, and if they are, you find a way to vote them out immediately. And not just at the election level, the nomination level is actually in places like rural Alberta is more important than the general election. This determines who's going to be the representative of the party that's likely going to win, which is going to be the Conservative Party. Although provincially that might change, but that's important. Get involved on your boards, get involved in those local nominations. Run for office if need be, especially in upcoming municipal elections. Demand your leaders push back and fight this Great Reset movement at every turn. And what specifically should we be fighting for as an example? Well, for one, we need to push for the decentralization of government power back to the local level, wherever possible. Bring decision-making back to our local communities and our province, where it is far more accountable. Okay? Now, for example, you may have heard that our federal Canadian government wields far too much power and control over the provinces, especially Alberta. Ottawa has been using this control to rob us of our resources and our wealth for years in order to buy votes in other provinces using socialist policies like equalization, carbon taxes, the NEP, and the list goes on and on. Now, under the Great Reset, and as Mr. Trudeau stated during the election, Ottawa's goal is to now phase out the West's oil and gas industry entirely. The only effective way to fight this economic tyranny, economic terrorism, because that's what it is, the only way to fight this is to take back the power to make decisions here that will benefit the women, the men, and the children of our great province. We do this by replacing the RCMP with a provincial police force accountable to us. We do it by collecting all taxes, federal and provincial, and remitting to the federal government only what is theirs after first taking back what they took from us in equalization. We do it by opting out of all federal controlled programs seeking to govern our pension plan, our natural resources, our health care, our education. Get Ottawa out of our lives. We use every single tool at our disposal to force Ottawa to give back power to the people of Alberta And this may mean some pretty tense times. It may mean some strategic civil disobedience where appropriate.
Yes.
But we have to do this. Because if we don't, my friends, Ottawa is going to bleed this province dry. It will destroy our economy and our freedoms, and we will be under the control of a primarily unelected leftist set of globalists, dead set on imposing their agenda on our backs, their Great Reset agenda, without a second thought of how that agenda will destroy the lives of the communities and people that we love. And we cannot let that happen.
No.
Yeah, we can't let that happen. So think for a moment about what is happening all around the world with the so-called COVID pandemic. In the name of this crisis, governments have shut down entire industries, destroyed countless businesses, confined families to their homes, segregated seniors against their will, denied medical treatment and procedures that weren't COVID related to the sick and those who need it, forced us to wear non-medical face coverings for over a year. All of these things were unimaginable in 2019. Honestly, I knew that the leftists were bold, but did any of you possibly think of this in 2019? It's incredible how it's happened. They're not unimaginable anymore. And so many have gone along with this being told it was their civil duty to do so, their patriotic duty to do so. Well, it's our patriotic duty to demand that it stops now. And I'd like you to ask yourself, when this COVID crisis is over and the globalists go back to the climate crisis, do you really think leftists like Justin Trudeau won't learn and apply what has happened here to their so-called climate crisis? Frankly, it's not only possible, it's entirely likely that these politicians and globalist billionaires and big tech will try and use many of the tactics deployed to address the COVID crisis to now fight their even more deadly so-called climate crisis. After all, COVID just kills people. CO2, well, as far as they're concerned, that could destroy the entire world. If a few million have to lose their livelihoods and a few billion their right to free speech in order to save the world, well, that's a small price to pay for them. Think about that. We cannot let that happen. We need to be aware and we need to be strong. We need to speak up, we need to be involved, be unapologetic in doing so. Be smart about it. Don't be lunatics, as I'm sometimes called. Be smart about it, but do so peacefully without resorting to the divisive language of the left. Do not be silenced by the Trudeaus, the Kennys, the Facebooks, the Twitters of this world. We are Albertans. We are one of the last strongholds of liberty, and we need to keep it that way.
Yes.
Yeah. Wave that flag. I was saying we need a few more Alberta flags up on this stage next time, I think, eh?
Yeah.
Do not be silenced anymore. We can do it, we must. It's our duty to come together and keep this beautiful land, this gorgeous land of ours, strong and free for our families, our children, and for their children.
Yes.
And I know we can if we will stand together and be courageous. And that's why I thank you for being here and being courageous today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. That was wonderful.
Yeah.
I want to thank all the speakers here, Dell and Matt and Rob. I want to thank everyone here that came. This is a great site, and we need more of these, and we need all of you to be involved. Get involved with your children and the rest of your family. Get the message out. There's lots that we can do. Write letters, make phone calls. Do your civic duty, which is to fight the lockdowns. So thank you for coming, and I want to say everyone have a wonderful day. This is World Freedom Day. So we are partaking in World Freedom Day. I'd also like to say there's information. I just want to reiterate that there's information and posters and stuff over at the table. Please help yourself with those things. Everyone have a wonderful day.
Sunday.